Some women, they spend their entire lives waiting. Just waiting. Waiting to be chosen, waiting to be truly seen, waiting for a kind of love that feels like it was promised to them, but never quite arrives. Their stories aren't the loud ones. They don't happen on big stages. They're whispered in the quietest corners of the world, in that little space between heartbeats. And in the silent, graceful way they endure 1,000 painful moments.
And these are the stories of women who learn to live with this ache, the ache of being unwanted. They learn to build a home inside their own strength because the world just hasn't offered them any shelter. They're taught that their purpose is to endure, to bend, to be silent. But what happens when that silence finally breaks? What happens when two women like this, pushed into the very same dark corner, find not a rival, but a reflection of themselves?
It's a story about a love that was never, ever supposed to exist. A love that grows not in the warm sunlight, but in the shared darkness of a life they were forced to live. A love that becomes the most powerful act of rebellion in a world that seems determined to crush them. This is the story of Mariam and Laila.
Our story starts in Afghanistan, a long time before the tanks and the rockets. I want you to picture a land of poetry and wild pistachio trees, of busy bazaars that smell of cardamom and cumin, a place of ancient stories just whispered on the wind. But this world, for all its beauty, also had old, unbending rules, especially for a little girl born with a shadow over her name.
This was the first word Mariam really, truly understood, harami. And it wasn't just a word, it was a judgment, a life sentence that was whispered to her by her own mother, Nana. It meant she was an accident, an illegitimate person who would never have a real claim to the things everyone else just had, things like family or a home or just acceptance. It was a word that told her she was a weed, something to be pulled up and just tossed aside.
She grew up in a tiny mud hut, a kolba, far away from the city, with only her bitter mother for company. Her one joy, her one piece of light in the whole world was Thursday. That was the day her father, Jalil, would come to visit. He was a rich man from the city, with other wives and other legitimate children. But for just a few hours every week, he would sit with Mariam, call her his little flower, and tell her stories. And in those moments, she didn't feel like a harami. She felt chosen. She felt loved.
But her mother, Nana, who had been cast out by Jalil, she only saw betrayal. She filled Mariam's world with her own pain, and she taught her the harsh lessons she had learned, that a woman's life is mostly one of suffering, that men will always, always betray you, that hope is a dangerous and foolish thing, and that in the end, a man's heart just won't stretch to make room for you.
On her 15th birthday, just filled with this desperate, fluttering hope, Mariam walked all the way to her father's house, truly believing he would finally welcome her in. But he didn't. He left his own daughter to sleep on the street, too ashamed to claim her. And the next day, when she returned to the only home she'd ever known, she found her mother had hanged herself. In that one awful moment, Mariam's world was just gone. She was an orphan, a disgrace. And so she was quietly married off to a stranger from Kabul, a man named Rashid, and sent away. Just like that, her childhood was over.
But as Mariam's world was shrinking into the four walls of a silent marriage in Kabul, a very different story was unfolding in that exact same city, a life that was just beginning to bloom. This was the story of Laila, a girl growing up in a world that could not have been more different from Mariam's.
Laila's world was just filled with light. Her father was a kind teacher who filled her head with poetry and told her she could be anything she wanted to be. She went to school, she had friends, and she shared this beautiful, secret love with her childhood best friend, Tariq. Her future felt so bright and boundless. She was everything Mariam was never allowed to be.
But that boundless future was so fragile. War came to Kabul, not all at once, but in pieces. First the Soviets, then the Mujahideen fighting for control, and the battles that were once a distant rumor became the terrifying daily sound of rockets screaming overhead. And then one afternoon, a single stray rocket, it just erased Laila's entire world. It fell on her home, it killed her mother and father, and it left her buried in the rubble, an orphan, completely and utterly alone.
And who was it that pulled her from the wreckage? It was Rashid, Mariam's husband. He took the wounded girl into his home. And soon, seeing an opportunity, he made Laila his second wife. And just like that, two women from different worlds, one raised in shame, the other in hope, were forced to live under one roof, as rivals for the affection of one cruel man.
At first, there was just this cold, bitter silence between them. Mariam, the forgotten first wife,
She saw Laila as everything she wasn't: young, educated, a threat. And Laila, well, she saw Mariam as just another part of her prison. But then, Laila's daughter, Aziza, was born. And this tiny, innocent child, she became a bridge. In Aziza's cries, in her small hands reaching out, Mariam, who had longed for a child of her own, found a piece of her heart she thought was long dead. One night, Laila offered her a cup of tea. It was such a simple gesture, but it meant everything. The walls between them, they just began to crumble. They started to share their stories, their fears, their pain. And in that shared darkness, they found not a rival, but a sister. They became mothers together. They became a family.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What really makes a family? Is it something you're born into, or is it something you build? Is it a promise made not in some big ceremony, but in the quiet moments of shared survival, in the choice to protect one another when no one else will?
Their newfound peace, though, was so fragile. Outside the walls of their home, a new, even more brutal force took control of Kabul, the Taliban. And the tyranny they had endured in private from Rashid suddenly became the law of the land for all women.
It's incredible when you think about it. Their private prison just became a public one. Inside the house, Rashid controlled their every move. Outside, the Taliban controlled all women. Inside, he isolated them. Outside, women were banned from schools, from jobs, from even walking outside without a man. The personal tyranny they had lived with for years had just expanded to the size of an entire city.
In a world where a woman's life was worth nothing, where every little joy was forbidden, their love for each other became a quiet rebellion. Every shared look, every whispered comfort, every time they stood together to protect the children from Rashid's rage, it was an act of defiance. It was them declaring that they were still human, that they still had something precious that could not be taken from them. They even tried to escape once, a desperate failed attempt that only brought more brutality down on them, but it bound them together even tighter.
Years went by like this, and then one day, the impossible happened. Laila's childhood love, Tariq, who she believed had been dead for years, he found her. He came back. But their reunion, a moment of impossible joy, it unleashed a monstrous rage in Rashid that would change everything, forever.
When Rashid found out, his violence just exploded. He dragged Laila by her hair and he began to beat her without mercy. And as his hands closed around her throat, choking the life right out of her, Mariam watched. And she saw not just Laila, but herself. She saw every woman who had ever been silenced and broken by men like him, and she understood, with this chilling certainty, that he was going to kill her.
And in that one moment, something inside Mariam shifted. For 27 years, she had endured. She had obeyed. She had bent. She had been the weed, the unwanted thing. The woman who accepted her lot in life was just to suffer. But she would not let him take Laila. Not now, not ever. With a shovel from the tool shed, Mariam made a choice. It wasn't an act of hate. It was a final, desperate act of love. She ended Rashid's life to save Laila's. In one single moment, a lifetime of silent suffering ended, not with a whimper, but with a roar of protection. A mother saving her child.
In the quiet aftermath, Mariam made another choice. She knew only one of them could be free. She confessed to the murder alone, making sure that Laila and Tariq and the children would have a chance to escape, to find safety, to finally live the life they deserved. It was her final, ultimate sacrifice.
As she faced her execution, Mariam wasn't afraid. She thought about her life, the illegitimate child of a lowly villager, a weed. But she wasn't leaving the world that way. She was leaving as a friend, a guardian, a companion, a mother. She was leaving as a woman who had loved and who had been so deeply loved in return. For the first time, she felt her life had meaning. She was a person of consequence. Laila's father once read her a poem about the city of Kabul, and it spoke of the 1,000 splendid suns that hide behind its walls. And that poem, it wasn't just about the city. It was about the women. Women like Mariam, whose brilliance, whose strength, whose capacity for love stays hidden from the world, but shines with the intensity of a sun for those they protect. Her sacrifice allowed Laila not only to survive, but to one day return to Kabul, to help rebuild, to work in an orphanage, carrying Mariam's legacy of love forward into the world.
And it just makes you wonder, how many other stories like hers exist in the world? How many splendid suns are shining brightly in the lives of the women you know? Their quiet strength holding entire worlds together, unseen and unsung.